good evening, and welcome to episode 111 of the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Zama. I'm back on your screens. It has been great to have a little break. Thank you very much to Esther for holding it down in Echo last week. And of course, it is Friday. We're wrapping up a really great week in property. And this week, we're going to be exploring the different ways that property investors, really successful property investors, find success through refinancing their property. And I'm sure you're probably thinking, what is refinancing? How does it actually work? Why would property investors even look into refinancing? And even exploring the difference between refinancing and flipping. That's some of what you can expect on this evening's conversation. And of course, we want to certainly hear from you. If you're a property investor, if you've ever refinanced a property before, how was that experience? I know that it can be quite an intimidating experience, especially if you don't know the process and you don't work with a team that will help you and guide you in refinancing your property or even different properties in your property portfolio in order to maximize your property portfolio. So do share with us how that experience was. If you're exploring doing it, what are some of your reservations when it comes to refinancing? Maybe you don't quite know much about it, then certainly do drop us those questions down here below. And of course, this guest this evening certainly doesn't need any introduction. We're going to be speaking to Taurai Jack, who's the co-founder of M5 Property Addicts. Taurai, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Boom, boom. How's it going, Zama? Thanks for having me around.
It's always a pleasure, TJ. I think one of the great things, when it comes to speaking certainly to you and even some of your other business partners is you are the guys who are already doing this, right? We speak to a lot of property investors, certain people who watch the show are property investors, some of them wanting to grow their property portfolio and having the opportunity to speak to people who've already walked that path, have already made some of the mistakes that have cost them money along the way, is always so helpful because it also helps us not make some of those mistakes as much as possible. But of course, TJ, this evening we're looking at refinancing. I know that this is one of those, terms that gets thrown around a lot in the property investor circles with different investors saying, this is a potential way to maximize your property portfolio, to grow your property portfolio. So let's break it down to our viewers at home when we talk about, refinancing a particular property. What exactly do we mean?
Yeah, thanks, Zama. So I think the first thing that I want to stress out here is that, number one, we can never talk about refinancing if the people are not comfortable with the debt, right? And debt is one of those things that you can utilize to grow your portfolio. But from our background, when the moment you start talking about debt, people start getting scared. Don't take out debt. The only debt that you should take is your house. Now, there's two types of debts, right? Let's get that out of the way. The first debt is debt that we get so that we can go and buy Nando's and anything that is consumer. That's kind of like money going down the drain. So that's bad debt, right? Then there's good debt. Good debt is that you're getting the debt, but it's also putting money in your pocket. And that's what we're talking about here. So once we now understand that, or we are comfortable with the fact that we've got good debt, the next thing that we want to talk about, Zama, is in property itself, when you're refinancing, there's actually two ways you can do it. And I want to stress out the fact that the first one that I'm going to talk about is when you actually have a property and you have owned this property for a while. And what do I mean for a while? It's about you bought a property for 500,000 and you've been owning this property now for, let's say, about 10 years, 15 years, right? What has now happened? What has happened is that we all know that the moment you buy a property, it appreciates in value. So by doing nothing, the value of the property is going up. And by you also paying down on your debt, the value is also going up. So which means that
you build that equity into that facility. Yes.
100%. So you got that equity, and that's a new terminology for some of us. We might not know what equity is, but that's what it is. And I also want to jump into that. Sometimes when you're buying a property, you can actually buy that equity. And I'll come back to that a little bit later because that's another opportunity there. So for the fact that now you have been having this property for 10, 15 years, there is equity, the next thing that you can do is either you can go directly to your bank, the bank that where your bond is, and you can speak to them and they will literally refinance the property for you. So which means that you're saying, hey, I was about to finish my property, paying off my property for the next 5 years, but can you extend it again? So they will do that. So it's a new contract that is going to take in. Different banks have different terminology of this and different products that you can utilize. The point there, Zama, is the equity now becomes available to you as the individual, and you can literally do as what you want. However, when you're doing investments, for me, the tenant is now going to be paying off the same debt, but the money that I have now extracted, I can go and buy property number 2. And now I'm buying this property cash, right? So if I'm buying property number 2 cash, the first one, my tenant is paying that off. And potentially, if I gear it up, gearing up just means that you're buying the property to a certain level with the debt. I could be getting cash flow, profit, right? Now on property number 2, I'm buying this cash. So automatically, because I'm buying it cash, I've got a bigger profit, right? And I can recycle the same thinking that I've had on the same property. Does it make sense?
Yeah. And I think, one of the interesting things I've seen different, and I hope to viewers at home, getting a good sense. I like talking refinance with even some of the finance guys, because one of the things that they will take is in the event where you already, let's say you're able to buy a certain property cash, and you're able to even buy it, that property number 2, you're able to buy it cash. And let's suppose you're able to buy it at a really good amount, let's say at around 300K, but already properties in that area are even going, let's say, for 500K. And if you maybe do a little bit of work, maybe you can even push it to a 600K. That is already paid off because you bought it cash. Then you're able to even have that finance to access some of that money. So it's a good way to be able to extract money or value, not just from the first property that you've owned for quite a number of years, but even when you're now buying the second property, whether you decide you want to buy it necessarily outright cash because it's a low amount, or I've seen some people sort of spread it out, let's say buy 2, put down significant equity on 2 more simultaneously instead of doing one. So I think that certainly is a great model for people to use when they, like we were saying, when you already have owned the property, perhaps you've been paying the bond for about 10 years. So you've already, and I think a lot of people who watch the Private Property Podcast, one of the tips that we always give is try to always put in a little extra every month, even if it's as little as 500 Rand every month. That does help you, especially if you didn't, for example, put down a deposit at the beginning. So then you've now built up that equity, and by the time you want to go approach the banks, then you can certainly use this model. So TJ, then so that's the first model, right? Where you essentially using, a property that you've essentially owned, and you're still paying it off, perhaps there's 10 years that you've paid off, or whatever number of years. So then what's that second model that you were referring to?
100%. So the second model, Zama, which is what I do now, in one of my subsidiaries called the M5 Chart. And basically what we do there is that we put monies together with our partners, and it's all cash, right? And we go and buy distressed properties where a bank, if they would come through to see it, the bank would say there is no value in it, right? So once we have done this, because we've got the cash, we can take the risk. We understand we've got a team. We understand if we're to renovate this thing, how much is it going to be? So we know all of that up front. So once we've got that, the partners are on board, we go and look for the property, and then you turn it around. Turning it around just means that you're bringing it back to its former glory, or even better, right? And I want to give you a little bit of mathematics here, a bit of numbers, so that it can explain the deal. So I bought this property in Boksburg. I bought it for 700,000. And within this area, Zama, it's in a commercial area. So this property is a mixed area. Okay. And we went on to put in 400,000 on that property. So we're all in here now for 2.1, right? When we are done, Zama, what happened was that we put in tenants on there. We're now getting a rental income of 40,000 Rand. When we went to the bank, before actually we went to the bank, we went to our estate agent and to an evaluator. The evaluator came and evaluated the property at 3 million rand. Now, we only have 2.1 in it. That is hard.
But wait, let's go back there, TJ, because I'm sure viewers at home lost you there in the bit. So you bought it for 700K, and right. How much did you put into it?
Right, so we bought it 700. We put in an additional 400. So we're in it now on 1.1 million.
Yeah.
Right. So 1.1 million, we're only in it now. However, your rental now was sitting at 40,000, and the valuation came at 3 million. Right. Okay. Now, the bank, whenever they are seeing something that is fully functional, you got a rent roll, Zama. The property is clean, it's in a good area, you know what you are doing there, right? The bank is able to give you more than what you've actually put in, right? They're able to give you close to the value of the property because that's what they're seeing, right? In this case, Zama, I actually got out 1.5 million on that property, which meant that on my 1.1 that I had put in initially, that money, we got it back. And we got an additional 400,000. Yes, it might look like profit, but it's not really profit because it's debt still that you still need to pay down. But your tenant is paying it for you, right? And on your rental income, you got a rental income of 40,000, you can still afford to service that debt. But now what happens to the 1.1? What do you do with it? Or should I say the 1.5? What do you do with it? You take that again, you go on to project number 2. If project number 2 is identical to this project here, how many times can you roll this over and over and over? And this is where, for me and my team members at M5 Property Addicts, we get confused with people that buy this type of properties and then they flip them and sell them. Because for me, when I'm now looking at this, I still own the property. I'm still getting rent. Had I sold it, I would have only earned what? Maybe I would have sold it for 1.5. Let's assume that we're comparing apples to apples. I would have just earned 400,000.
And so then you're still gonna get taxed.
Oh, come on. Don't mention that. Because a lot of flippers that are going out to flip, they don't even think up that far.
Yeah. You know, and you actually already touching on something that I'm sure that I wanted to explore after the break, TJ. That's, you know, the concept of flipping, because I'm sure people are thinking, okay, I mean, we speak about it, you know, broadly. Sometimes we've touched on it here in the Private Property Podcast, but I wanted to then look at the difference between refinancing and flipping, because as you say, you wouldn't have flipped that property. And there are people who flip and do it really well. And, you know, they already have a system. They love the margins that they make. And for them, that's their strategy. They don't want to have to deal with tenants and the tenant management and all that stress, which is fantastic. So it's certainly not to, you know, put people off flipping, but it's to understand that there's a fundamental difference between flipping, refinancing, especially if you're going to refinance the way that TJ has just broken down. And so you almost need to think, and this is one of the very important things, TJ, that we, you know, always mention to our viewers at home, and a lot of guests also emphasizes that when you start with your plan at the beginning and you set out some of your intentions, it helps. So looking at what kind of strategy do you want to have? Are you going into property because you're looking at capital appreciation? Are you going into it just for cash flow purposes? Then it helps you when you want to make a decision whether you're flipping or whether you're going to, you know, keep refinancing and having various properties, because maybe for you it's about cash flow, making maximum, you know, amount of money, or even amassing quite a large property portfolio. We're going to go for a quick break. When we come back, we're going to look at that difference between financing and flipping. And I also wanted to take some of your questions and comments at home. I'm sure, you know, a lot of us probably do explore refinancing. I always say, TJ, to, you know, viewers at home, you know, real estate finance is one of those things that sometimes trips me over quite a bit. In the other weeks, I was writing, you know, a long thing. It was like a 5-hour exam. So it can be quite complicated, but it doesn't always have to be. I think if you certainly understand the fundamentals and the basics, and by the time you speak to a professional, you at least have a sense of what you are talking about. We're going to go for a quick break and we'll be back just after this. Welcome back to the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Zama. So this is what happens when you take a few days off, you come back and there are gremlins in the system. Well, we're back on your screen this evening, and as I was saying before we cut off there, that of course we want to look at, TJ, the difference between refinance and property. We are, of course, looking at refinancing and why it's so important, how it works, and the different ways that really good property investors use this method. And of course, I'm joined by TJ, who is Taurai Jack, the co-founder of M5 Property Addicts. CJ, so do take us through that difference between flipping and refinancing, as you're saying before the break. I think this is one of those things that people sometimes do make a mistake with. Bongs, I see your message there saying that you need a blackboard now, you're lost. We'll definitely do a nice masterclass. I think this is one of those things. I promise I'll do a masterclass because I love talking finance. So we'll definitely bring in a masterclass and really do a good tutorial because there's so many different examples and so many different ways to refinance. I think this one we look at it as a nice intro to refinance. And I think keep those questions, certainly do send them through to us, and we'll put in a really nice, masterclass when we dig deeper into this one. And I really see Bongs again saying, I really need to learn this. I think this is what I need to be doing in order to get rich. And I think, Bongs, I think a lot of people, certainly in property, people who are property investors who do this quite regularly, understand that there are various methods to growing and scaling your property portfolio, and refinancing is one of those methods. So you almost want to really master this, and you're going to be set. So TJ, do tell us that difference, refinancing versus flipping.
Yeah, so Zama, I think this is almost right, one of those things that, it's a really preference thing, and I want to give the example to say that what strokes my boat doesn't really stroke the next person's boat, right? And that's where it needs to start off from. When I was employed, Zama, it was about exchanging my time for the money. And that I realized that I don't want to do. I want to exchange my time to be buying assets, and assets needs to pay me, right? So that's my investment philosophy together with my partners. We don't work for money. The way I see flips, Zama, is that you're a trader. You're buying at a low, so you're a wholesaler. You're buying at a low, and you're going to put your markup, whichever way you're going to dress it up, and you're going to sell it. For that reason, Zama, for the rest of your life, you're going to be working, because if you stop doing that, then you have no income, because your profits that you're going to be pouring in or pouring out of all of these properties, sooner or later, they're going to dry out. Whereas if you look at me from the other side, I'm accumulating assets by refinancing. My tenant is paying me, my debt out, right? So year on year, my rental is increasing if I'm buying in a good neighborhood, and my appreciation on my property is also increasing. So from a balance sheet perspective, my equity is growing, right? So I'm making more money there as well, right? And that's another secret, because by the time you're refinancing, the bigger your equity is, the better it is for you to refinance, right? And then on top of that, I have cash flows, Zama, where I am not working 100% in it. I can literally employ a property manager whom I give it 8%, a 10%, a 6%, it don't matter, who's going to property manage my properties. And I get money for James by doing nothing. And that's the beautiful property for me, right? So if we now want to look at the difference, I've just given you the creed there of what is the philosophy behind it. And if that is, if any of these philosophies resonate with anyone there, then already you can choose, right, the path which you want to take in. But if I get a property, Zama, in Pompurospruit, right? And by the way, there is no place called Pompurospruit, but it's a very good deal. And I can literally put in 100,000 in there, and I can make 400,000. For the fact that Pompurospruit is far away from me, I don't know that area, I will choose to do a flip. Because it's an area that I don't invest, I don't know that area, I might never be in that area. It's an area that is not growing, and how can I make some money? I will make some money and I'll get out. But my primary business is to buy and rent. Why am I doing that? I can increase my affordability by income that I'm getting every month, right? Number two, my balance sheet is growing with the equity that I'm getting. Rich people, Zama, don't get rich by selling and buying. They get rich because they have assets that they've got. Once your foundation of your assets is great, you can take risk whatever you want to do now because your base is strong. And for me, that's how I differentiate the two in terms of flipping and where you're actually doing what we traditionally call rentals. So for that reason, it's really about what is really more enticing to you and your property journey that you want to do. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it definitely, it does, TJ. And I think one of the things I've already promised, viewers at home, we'll definitely do a masterclass, because I think refinance, whenever we talk finance, you almost want to dig a little deeper. Next level, we'll have that whiteboard or blackboard and start putting numbers up so that you get a really good illustration of some of the, the numbers that we run and some of the things that you really need to consider. I think a really big caveat to everybody at home is, obviously, when you're making some of this decision, certainly need to be speaking to, whether it's qualified accountant and people who understand what your financial needs analysis is going to be, who are going to do that and really help you structure your finances adequately. Because I think sometimes, as we were saying with TJ, some people you want to flip. So in the example that he made, where they put in 1.1, you're able to perhaps sell it for 1.5. You're thinking, oh, I'm just going to get 400K. You haven't factored in capital gains tax, and so your numbers then get thrown off. You probably haven't factored in even transfer fees. So I think being able to look at then what are the other costs that are associated, or what that would potentially eat into your profit margin, becomes so important. But I think the really big thing with our conversation this evening is to already get you thinking about the different factors that you need to be aware of when we talk about refinancing. We're, of course, taking your questions and comments at home. We've got a comment here from some of our viewers watching on YouTube. We've got one here from Aaron saying that's a powerful statement and motivation by private property. We've got another one here from Andile Majola saying, thank you very much, guys. This is, this is adding quite a lot of value. Thank you very much for tuning in there, Andile. We also got a question on our Facebook page from Mkateko Ahape, who asks, is equity only determined by the number of years you have had the property, or if you're making additional payments towards the bond, then you also get equity faster?
Not necessarily so, Mika. So the other way that you can get equity on a property is, I think Zama alluded into it a little bit earlier on when we were starting off. We always talk about you can buy a property on a discount, right? So the same property that we gave an example of, to say that I bought it for 700 and I put in an additional 400,000. The normal value of that property at that time should have been 3 million had it been looking the way it was looking. So, but I bought it at a discount. Why? Because either it might have been a distressed building, or maybe it had just been left idle for a while, so it wasn't functioning. So for the fact that I bought it for 700, I have this 700 all the way to 3 million. It's a discount, by the way, right? So I'm buying it cheap. Same applies going to auction, you're buying it cheap, right? What you're buying is equity there. You're actually buying that. For those of us who understand accounting, the moment I buy that property and I register it in my book, from an equity perspective, my balance sheet shoots up, because the real value is 3 million, but I actually bought it for 700. So which means now the difference here becomes money that I have on my balance sheet. And if I'm to go to the bank, they can actually give me that the difference there of what my equity can carry. So banks will look at it differently in terms of risk, in terms of you, the individual. But the point is that you have enough assets on your balance sheet. And when I started understanding this, Zama, that's when I was like, I think I love this property thing. Because the more you buy on a discount, the more your balance sheet is growing. So you kind of like having free money, if we call it that. So my right now, my most important skill in my business is negotiation. Because if I know how to negotiate, what to negotiate, when to negotiate, I am literally buying by just having the conversation and writing it down and signing. I'm banking a couple of millions if I can.
And I think, TJ, something to also bear in mind, especially for, the investors who are probably still starting out, so perhaps you're buying, let's say, one investment property, maybe a 1-bed or a 2-bed, because I think that, TJ is now at that level where you're looking at sort of block at flats. So even the way that you look at that asset, the way the rental split works, that it sometimes mixed use is slightly different. Because the risk is also spread quite nicely. So I think, Gateko, I think one of the ways to also just look at putting in more equity is, like you're saying, where you add in a bit more. Sometimes it's even if you get granted 100% loan, so the 100% loan to value, if you've put down that deposit, that's the bit that you essentially have equity on. I mean, I know some of the investors I've spoken to who use really interesting, and it speaks to what TJ was saying, where suppose a property you're able to get it for 500,000, but let's suppose it is selling for, let's say, 800,000 in that particular area. And when the bank comes and evaluates the property, they're able to extend that 800,000 loan facility to you. So you go and register that 800,000 in the deeds office, and that you've bought it for 500,000. You still need to qualify, obviously, for that 800,000. You now know that when you want the cash from the bank, you're able to access it because it's money that's already been there. So there are different really interesting ways to look at accessing money from bond facilities, where sometimes you're adding in a little more, sometimes, as TJ is saying, you certainly get really good discounts. And the big thing, as he's saying there, when it comes to getting really good discounts, is being able to negotiate. Now, TJ, I do have to, wrap up with you. I think the last question that I want to put to you is from, one of our, from our guests, who says, I want to refinance, but I don't think I will qualify. What determines whether you qualify for the equity amount or not?
Run the question again, Zama.
So Portion Damasa says, I want to refinance, but I don't think I will qualify. What determines whether you qualify for your equity amount or not?
Oh, okay, great. So whenever you're wanting to get more money from the bank, right? And this question of I don't think we should do away with it, and let's just do the checks, right? That's why bond originators are there. They don't charge you anything. And that's why your bank is there as well. You can quickly go in and check, right? Then we get that maybe not, out of the way. Now, it depends here, right? Let's assume on your property now, you've got about 300,000-400,000 of equity that you can tap into. But the qualification now is a challenge. I want to stress the fact that different banks will look at it differently, right? So now we have started seeing banks, this wasn't the case like 5-10 years ago, where banks will sort of like, is this the property that you, it's an investment property, so there's a rental income that's coming from there. That's scenario number one. So we can take 70%, 80% of that rental income on that property, right? So it's no longer about you alone, who's the person who is funding this. So it's you plus maybe a 70% of that property that you own. If it is your own property, then you don't have a tenant on it. Yes, that might be a challenge. However, a bond originator could then look at your circumstance, right? And could maybe advise you to say, at this moment, refinancing might not be the best idea with your bank, right? Where you are, let's assume Standard Bank. But if we switch to FNB, FNB is going to give you X amount. So they will do the homework for you. And with that, you don't have to do anything, give them paperwork, they do all the work for you, and then boom. So you might not get to the 0300, but you might get 150. But what can 150 do for you? I've bought a property for 160 before. So there's options.
And there definitely are options. TJ, I think we're going to leave it there this evening. And it really has been a pleasure to have you on the show. It's always great to have you on. And as promised to viewers at home, we definitely are going to, have a good masterclass. We'll bring in a masterclass. I know I've promised even one on restructuring. So we'll definitely do this one. I see Paul Adams there saying, I just want to thank TJ for being TJ. He doesn't only share his knowledge, but his personal experiences and doing it so unselfishly. What is that? Unselfishly. This is what happens when you're like trying to read the screen that's far. And also my English bundles are slowly running out. And it's saying you're just amazeballs. Thank you, M5 Property Addicts. Thank you very much there, Paul Adams. And I think I'm going to leave it there because I'm running out of my English bundles. TJ, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Zama. It's been great. Have a great weekend.
And that is Taurai Jack, who's the co-founder of M5 Property Addicts. Well, folks, that's it from me in this Friday evening on the Private Property Podcast. You can see I'm slowly getting back to being on air. I've missed being with you and spending my weekdays at 7 p.m. with you. While I don't leave you alone this evening, we are, of course, having the first time home buyers show shortly after this. So do stay tuned into that show. ST will be holding the fort and, of course, speaking to somebody who's no stranger, because we've spoken to this person right here on the Private Property Podcast. You definitely want to stay tuned to find out who I am talking about. And, of course, over the weekend, you can catch Chad on the Developers Show. That's, of course, another one you definitely do not want to miss, where we showcase some of the country's best developments and estates. And, of course, do go to register for the virtual property show, the very first of its kind. I'll also be emceeing and moderating some of the sessions. So I do look forward to seeing some of you participating in our virtual property show. So do sign up on the website, and we've also posted those details down here below. And of course, join us on the 2nd and 3rd of October. Well, that's it from me, Zamanto Nwakumalo. I'm back again with you next week, Monday, right here on the Private Property Podcast. And as usual, hoping you're staying home and staying safe.
and welcome back to the First Time Homebuyer Show. I'm your host, ST Class, and it's so lovely to be back. It's officially Friday. Let's get our weekend mode started. And I'm actually going to hit you straight with the question. Have you ever wondered, what is the correct age to start becoming a property mogul, to go on your property journey? What age should that be? Well, we have Obakeng Khaitate this evening, who is here to actually give us some advice and talk about some of the obstacles that came in the way when he bought his first home and started building 140 properties all before the time he turned 21. Good evening, Obakeng. How are you today?
Hey, I'm excited to be here, ST. I'm glad to be sharing some thoughts and wisdom with the viewers today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us, Obakeng. I'm so happy that you're here. This is advice that we all need, you know. This is the First Time Homebuyer Show. It's a podcast or a time where we learn more about how our journey will be to becoming property investors and becoming property moguls. So, Obakeng, tell us a little bit about you, where you're from, and how you started your property journey.
Okay, great. So you see, for me, I'm an accountant by profession, and by the time I was 21, I was already a trainee accountant. And so the issue of rents and cents and profit and losses, it was very important and very key. This is something I have been watching and doing almost all my life growing up as a teenager. So what happened is that I did my accountancy training in Johannesburg. I rented for the first 2 years, and then I realized that renting was not such a good idea because, you know, in as much as there's nothing wrong with renting, but when I looked at my personal balance sheet, it was not adding my net worth, me continuing to rent. So I made a decision very early on that I must buy my own property. And so when I'm talking about the fact that even before I was 21, I had 2 homes of my own. And because at that time in South Africa, being less than 21, you're a minor. So I had to get my parents to sign as surety, them being over 21. And yeah, that's how I started in property, to saying, you know, I needed to improve my balance sheet and stop wasting money on rental.
Exactly. You end up renting so much that you realize the amount that you spent on rent, you could have actually paid your mortgage, you know?
Absolutely.
And that's
Absolutely.
Exactly. So that's literally your journey. You realized renting was not the way to go. And that's what you did. You started buying your first home. So tell me a little bit more about when you bought your first property. You said back then, you know, you had to get surety signed by your parents. But what was that process like for you?
It was, I think for me, it was an eye-opener, because when I did my balance sheet the year after, I could see improvement. Individuals that understand the issue of expenses and assets and liabilities, they know that when you look at your income statement, when you are only a renter, you have a whole lot of expenses because of the renter. But so for me, 1 year after buying my own house, my balance sheet had improved, and I was more wealthy than before I owned my own property. And it was based on these 2 transactions, buying my first home and then my second home. I bought my second home because I said I needed to have an office, so I needed a larger home. So I bought a second home, and then I realized that, you know, I can do better. And that's how I went from my 2 homes and I went into over 100 properties.
Right. So that balance sheet, you keep repeating the word balance sheet. It's very important to always go back to see, you know, what we spent our money on, how much rent we were spending living in a certain place. So this brings me back now to when you bought your first property, and I'm sure now after you've built 140 properties, there's some things that you wish you had known back then that you know now.
Absolutely. I think, ST, it's very important, even as we are sharing this today, that individuals must understand that the issue of the balance sheet and the income statement, we shouldn't be scared of using these terms. These are not terms that only accountants do and understand. We are involved in income statements and balance sheet on a daily basis. We talk about a budget, you look at your salary, you say, this is how I'm setting my salary, my budget. You're focusing on your income statement. You're focusing on your balance sheet. So I think it's important that individuals do not divorce themselves from understanding a balance sheet and understanding an income statement. So having said that, yes, so that was a very serious transition for me to say, I don't want to keep renting. I need to buy my home so that I improve my net worth. And that's how I went from my first home, my second home, and then that's how I grew from there. Yes.
Exactly. And it's so important that you say your income statement, your balance sheets. It's things that we all need to understand. Yes, you may be in the accounting field, and these are terms you use on a daily basis, but it's something that we also can educate ourselves on. You know, when we see that we've been renting, and then we can see how we can go into investing in property and becoming property moguls. These are very important things we need to start educating ourselves on and learning more about. Okay, so that was the balance sheet and your income statements. So I would like to know, because this past week we've been talking about financial independence, financial freedom, why certain people invest in property. Why did you do it, Obakeng? What was your reason for investing in property?
For me, investing in property was more to say, how do I grow? From a very early age, I was just fascinated by the issue of wealth. And I read a lot of books on how the millionaires and the multimillionaires and the billionaires do it. So for me, being an accountant, having invested a lot of money in my own businesses, and so property was a new thing for me. So to answer the question, why did I do it? So yes, moving from my 2 homes to investing in a lot of properties, it was really to say, I can do it. I can be a billionaire. And my whole objective was, I want to be a billionaire. And that's why I went into property.
Exactly. And that's why I love this platform, because you talk about reading and educating yourselves on seeing people who have done it before and learning from them. And it's like you, who owned or built 140 properties before you turned 21. And on that topic, 140 properties seems like a lot, and it seems like a daunting task to take on at such a young age. So did you have someone that mentored you, that guided you through that process?
No, well, I would say not in the sense of mentee at that stage. However, what I have discovered is that I can say the truth is that the books I was reading, these were my teachers and mentors, because I would read stories about Richard Branson. I would read stories about, there's a gentleman called Reverend Ike. I would listen to their podcasts. And so my books at that time, those authors were my mentors. And that's why I'm so big on reading and studying and having people that have walked the journey guide me. One of the things that I think is very important for us to remember is that it doesn't matter what it is that you want to achieve. You want to be a multimillionaire, you want to be a billionaire. There are people that have already done that. So it therefore becomes very important to not try to recreate the wheel. The question you should ask yourself is, okay, I want to have 100 properties. I want to have 200 properties, 300 properties. The question we should be asking ourselves is, who has done it and how can I walk in those footsteps? Because as the saying goes, there is nothing new under the sun, and that's very important.
Very important. And you keep emphasizing reading, giving yourself the knowledge, and homework was also a very important thing that we learned from the podcasts in the week. Do your homework, do your own research to become that property mogul. But if you had a mentor back in the day, what certain questions could I ask someone if I have a mentor that's actually helping me? Or maybe, I decide, okay, Obakeng, I'd like you to be my mentor to also help me get 140 properties. What questions should I ask my mentor?
The questions you should ask your mentor is how can you, because what good mentors do is they have walked the journey before, and you should ask your mentor, how can I make this journey easier for me? Because the mentor has already walked the journey, the mentor has had some challenges in their own lives. And when you ask, how can I make my own journey of having, whether it's 100 properties or 200 properties, how can I make it easier? A good mentor would always be able to tell you that, look, this was my journey. This is where I made a mistake. This is where I fell down the ditch. Avoid that road, avoid doing it like this. And if you follow this advice, you should be able to do better than your mentor. So the question
I always talk about experiential learning, and that's why, and you keep emphasizing it's so good to learn from someone or have a mentor, someone who's done it, who's gone through the process, because they end up giving you the best advice. You know, they've experienced the obstacles, they've experienced things that have gone wrong on their journey. So they advise you to do things differently.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think Esther, it's important, that I always say people should get qualified advisors, qualified mentors. And when I say qualified, the silly example I always make is that you shouldn't ask me how to be a best mechanic because I don't know much about being a mechanic. So in as much as I would try to advise you, but I'm not qualified to teach and mentor someone how to be a great mechanic because it's not my area of expertise. So
exactly.
It's important that as you go and look for mentors, look for people that have done it, not in theory, but in practice. And they can give you practical examples of what to do and what not to do. Yes.
Exactly. Because when you have those practical examples, automatically, if I was buying my first property and I've gotten a practical example from a mentor, I feel at ease. The process becomes easier when we have these mentors. So Obakeng, we're quickly going to run to an ad break. And in this time, I'd like to ask our viewers to engage. Let us know, do you have mentors? Are you looking for a mentor who can help you? Please comment in this time, and we'll be back with Obakeng Khaitate. Sit tight. And welcome back to our viewers who are tuned in. We're speaking to Obakeng Khaitate about how he went from owning 1 or 2 homes to building 140 properties. He's explained why his goal was to do this. And we've also figured out that when you want to get a mentor in this game, in the property industry, figure out and find someone who has experienced this before, who can give you the proper advice when going forward. Welcome back, Obakeng. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Esther.
I'm going to move to we'd like to hear some advice from you, some advice to us who would like to invest in property in the future.
Okay. What would be the best advice? I would say, first and foremost, you must learn. And the very important thing is you must understand that success in property, as is success in anything else, is 90% mindset. What do I mean by that? I'm saying that it doesn't matter how successful you desire to be in property or in any business. Always remember and be aware that your success or failure on the journey of being a property mogul, 90% thereof is your mindset. Now, in some of the workshops and teachings I do, I always emphasize that success in any business, especially in property, only 10% thereof is tactics. What do I mean? 10% is tactics. There's many ways to invest in property. You could be buying depressed properties for refurbishing and reselling. You could be buying properties for flipping. You could be buying land. So all these things, this is what I call tactics. And it's important for our viewers to understand that all these tactics that you use in property, it only comprises 10% of your success. 90% of your success is your mindset. That is the key and important understanding that you must have moving forward.
So 90% mindset, 10% tactics. And I'm sure in this business, you've been in it for so many years. You've probably seen how some people have burned their fingers during this. So when investing in property, you've seen some people do very wrong things. And we'd like to know what that is so that we don't end up making the same mistakes going forward.
Yeah. So for instance, I have two individuals. I have two clients that I'm assisting now, and the reasons they have gone wrong in property is that one has purchased a property without fully understanding the income statement of a specific property. What they did, unfortunately, is they bought these sectional title properties without getting proof of the income and the expenditure of the building. Now, what they have, unfortunately, it was too late because they were already in the situation, is that when you buy a sectional title, you should not only rely on what the agent tells you to say. The rental here is 10,000. The levies here is 1,000. Special CSOS levies others. You must get evidence. You need to verify. It is very sad that we do have agents that are not as honest as they are supposed to be. And as a first-time home buyer, it is therefore very important to understand that if you do not have a mentor, take whatever the estate agent is telling you with a pinch of salt, in that you must understand that the estate agent's purpose is to sell you the property. They make money when you buy. So in as much as the Estate Agency Affairs Board requires and demands of estate agents to be ethical and honest, I must say, unfortunately, some of them are not so ethical and they are not so honest. So we have a case now where two of my clients, they are in a legal battle because the properties they purchased is losing money. Because these individuals were first-time home buyers, they went into the deal without checking in detail as to whether indeed the buildings and the properties they are purchasing are profitable. So I'm saying it's important as you go out there, make sure that you do not take what the attorneys, what the agents, what the homeowner is telling you about the property, but get third-party independent evidence of what the situation is.
Exactly. And that is my biggest fear, investing in property going forward, becoming a property mogul, is really, how do I know that the investment is profitable? So how do I know if I go buy a property that it is profitable? And that could maybe you could talk about your strategy for success. How do I know that this income is profitable?
Yeah, that is very important. Now I always say that we must remember that in property, you must make profit when you purchase. You mustn't buy a property and believe that in future, whether you say in 6 months or in a year, the property will be profitable. So for instance, in my case, when I acquired my properties, I made sure I did a proper calculation to say, what is the market value in the area? What are the people buying and selling properties for? And in this day and age, you do have your Lightstone reports. Anyone can subscribe to the deeds office. So you can get property valuations, you can get the costs and the sale prices of properties in the area. You see, investing in property is not it's something that you need to decide. And this is why I was saying earlier on that your success or failure in property is 90% mindset. You need to be an expert in a specific area. If you choose you want to buy a certain type of properties, you must understand that you must either spend a lot of time learning about residential properties in Bedfordview, if that is your area. Because if you look at Bedfordview, or if you look at Dainfern, or if you look at Tembisa or Alexandra, these are different properties. So you must take time to learn the specific area. You must understand what is going on. And as I say, one of the advantages of having a mentor is that you pay them for you to advance your success much quickly. if you have to, for instance, if I look at the number of years I've been in property, I always say to my mentees that, listen, you could take 20 years to learn what I have learned, or you could pay for some of the courses that I do have, and in a very short space of time, understand the pitfalls in property. And it doesn't only go for property only, it goes in any business, whether somebody wants to be a coach, a speaker. That is why mentors are important. That is why books are there. Individuals need to learn, get mentors and all that stuff. So very critical, especially in property. It is very important for you to choose and decide where you will be an expert, because whether you talk about an area or a type of property, types of properties, you have residential properties, you have commercial properties. These are different kettles of fish. So we are saying to first-time homeowners today that you need to choose which area you will specialize in. And even as you are saying that, I think it's important that people must understand that you can make money with any type of property. Now, one of the errors that first-time home buyers do, or people that are new in investing in properties, is that they would read one report, or they would hear what their cousin says, or they would hear what somebody says, and take that as research information, which is wrong. You must take time to get authoritative information about a specific market, about a specific type of property, and do not make decisions that are ill-informed, that are not from qualified individuals.
Exactly. And you spoke extensively about location, choosing your location, and also knowing the purpose of your investment. Why do you want to invest in property, And also, like you said earlier, about choosing a location. And I'd like to actually go into that, because first-time home buyers, how do we choose the correct location? How do we know that this is the one for us?
Well, it must come from what it is that you want to achieve. The correct location for you, it is something that is aligned to who you are. Now, for instance, let me make an example about myself. I'm not an individual that is into clubs and parties, for an example. So for me, commercial properties that are involved in that type of business do not align to who I am. So to answer the question, what is the right area? We always say that the first thing is we must assess, who are you? Because when you look at the billionaires today, whether you look at Warren Buffett, you look at Bill Gates, it doesn't matter who you look at. They are in the business that's aligned to who they are. So when we talk about what is the right area, the question you must ask is, who are you? What are your passions? What are your strengths? And as we ask these questions, we get to understand your personality and the type of properties and areas that will be suitable for you.
Exactly. So again, emphasizing on doing your own research, knowing exactly why, the purpose of your investment. And I just want to quickly take it back to income statements and balance sheets that we were talking about before the break. We have Msali Nozi, who says, wait, will the seller feel free to give you an income statement when you haven't bought or made your OTP?
Repeat the question again. Let me understand the question.
Sure. Will the seller feel free to give you an income statement when you haven't bought or made your OTP?
Oh, yes. No, look, the income statement and balance sheet, they've got nothing to do with the offer to purchase. So I think it's important that here we are talking about your personal income statement and balance sheet. Now, what happens is that we will share some resources later, but what happens is that you need to develop your income statement and your balance sheet as a person, as an individual, or as your own company. Now, these things have got nothing to do with the offer to purchase. Now, the issues of balance sheets and income statement, they become important when you go to the bank purchasing a property with your company. The banks will then say, yes, Joe, Peter, Susie, let's see your balance sheet. That's what the banks want.
Okay, so they want to see your own balance sheet, So I think because how I understood it earlier was that your income statement, seeing, let's say you've been renting for the past 3 years and you realize that, no, I'm spending too much money renting. Let me rather go make an investment because I would be spending a similar amount.
Oh yeah, yes. So what the banks do is they look at, so the importance of the income statement is that now you have been renting, you are paying, let's say you are paying 50,000 a month on your rental. So the banks look for your current income statement, and you're going to be showing that currently I'm renting, I'm paying 50,000. So the bank will then see that because you are purchasing a property, obviously now I would imagine in this case that you are purchasing a property where you're going to be staying there. So if your bond repayment is equivalent to 50,000, then the bank easily approves your loan because they can see that in terms of your existing income statement, you have been paying rental of 50,000, and now all that will happen is that because now there will be no more rental, it'll then be you will be settling your liability, your bond, so you will be able to qualify for that specific bond.
Exactly. That's how I understood it. And then Mtali also says, how do we ask for property financials?
Now that's very important, and it's important that you must understand that you make it a condition when you speak to the estate agent that I want to see the financials of the body corporate. And the right and honest agents will be able to speak to the body corporate and say, hey, I have a buyer who wants the financials of the body corporate. Now, the issue is very important here, ST. Remember, when you are buying a sectional title, you are buying into an existing business. So the issue of getting the balance sheet and the income statements, we prefer audited financial statements. The issue of getting the levy statements for the last 6 months, as a first-time buyer, you must ask for these things because otherwise you're going to be getting yourself into problem. If your financial statement is like a due diligence of you're buying a flat, it could be one flat out of 100 flats. You want to know whether the flat is in good health. Because if you don't ask for these financials, you could, as I said, you could be getting yourself into big trouble because you're not doing the right due diligence.
Exactly. And like you're saying, they should be able to give this to us if we ask for it. So already we know that's a red flag if they do not give it to us. So we can openly ask for the property financials for how the property's been doing over the past few years. We can ask for this. And as soon as they say, no, unfortunately, we can't, this is a big red flag, and you move away and you find other investments.
Absolutely. If they refuse information, just walk away. You must not believe the story that this is a once in a lifetime offer. You must buy it. Just sign here. One of the things that I have seen, I know I've got two individuals that I got them to cancel the OTP. What the agent had done is the agent had said, listen, just sign the OTP. We will get you the information afterwards. You do not do that. You get the information before you sign the OTP.
Okay, that's very good advice. Thank you so much, Obakeng. So just openly ask for these things. They should be given to you, especially if you're making such a big investment. Property is not a small thing. You know, this is a really big investment that you want to make, and you also want it to benefit you in the long run. So now, Obakeng, you're still obviously investing in property and you're still building properties around South Africa. What are some other challenges that you face today, continuing on your property journey?
Look, the challenges that I must say I have faced, and I'll tell you why I'm saying I have faced. I can talk about the recent projects we were doing in Gauteng. The challenge we faced there was that we were doing township establishments, and we only discovered quite late that there was no capacity. Johannesburg Water did not have capacity for both water and sewer. So the specific challenge in this case was that whereas we had already invested lots of money in acquiring properties, in paying professional fees, engineers, town planners, we discovered at a late stage that because of the capacity of the city, our development cannot be approved. That was a challenge. Now, I'm saying this to say that that has been the challenge. Going forward, however, we have got better teams in place, and the way we are doing our property developments and investments is in a more structured way. We have seen all the red flags to say, don't spend money on some of these things until, for instance, looking at the challenges we've had with Johannesburg water, that there are certain things you must find out. You must have the right town planners, engineers, environmentalists that ask the municipality the right questions before we embark on development. So I guess it's very similar as to what we're talking about there. So in my case, whereas I'm saying before we go on some of these property developments, we must clarify and make sure that there is enough water, there is enough sewage capacity before we spend money. It's similar to what we're talking about to say, before you sign the OTP, get the levy statements, get the balance sheets and income statement. So those are the challenges that we had faced. And I believe that the way we are doing things now going forward, we are in a much stronger and wiser position to do things better going forward.
And I think it's also very important because you're talking about working with a team. So if you're not investing in property by yourself and you have a team, it's also important that your team knows, like you said, the right questions to ask the certain people that you're working with on a big project like that. Like you said, 140 property, that's a very big project. So make sure that your team is also equipped with the right knowledge to go and ask the people the right questions. So last question from Nsali Nozi. Thank you so much for asking us these questions. We're here for it. This is for you, Obakeng. What strategy did you start with? So after buying your first home, what was the strategy you started with when building your 140 properties?
I used what they call using other people's money. What does you must remember? I was at the time I was not even 21 years old. And my balance sheet at that time was such that I could not buy the properties out of my bank balance, or the bank couldn't even approve at that time. So the strategy I use when I say using other people's money is that I signed the agreement, I signed contract, and immediately I went on a very serious drive to get buyers and investors to buy into my dream. So even today, whether you want to have 10 properties or 20 properties or 100 properties, people have all, for many, many years, made money and become property moguls, not using their own monies. And anyone can do that today.
Exactly. So figure out how you can maybe, because I think when it's more scarier when you're using your own money, because you fear losing all of this. You fear that the property might not be profitable, that your investment might fail at the end of the day. So figure out how, and you kept emphasizing, find your knowledge, do your research. And like you said earlier, you could share some of that with us, which would be amazing. So just before we close off, Obakeng, thank you so much for being with us this evening. Is there any last words and some advice that you would like to share with the viewers watching going forward and investing in property?
Yeah, look, there's quite a lot. I would want to share I've got a couple of, there's 2 books that I have got available that after the podcast, what I will do is that I will comment briefly as to how the individuals can get the books. That's number 1. And also early next week, I will share a link on the private property page for people that are interested to get more information, that they can be able to do what I have done and even better, because it is my passion, it is my desire just to share my knowledge and share some of the things that I have seen to say, if you are serious about building your property portfolio, this is some of the mistakes I made, don't do them, and you will become a property mogul.
Thank you so much, Obakeng. It's been really lovely having you on the show this evening. There you've heard it. We can all become property moguls, but investing in property has no age. Obakeng was only 21 when he built 140 properties. I'd like to say thank you to the viewers who have commented. And, engage with us on the platform. The First Time Homebuyer Show is moving to Wednesday next week. So catch us there, same time, but on Wednesday on the private property page. Thank you so much. Have a lovely weekend, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Julia Chen. I'm a restaurateur living in the Cape Town City Bowl. My restaurant, Hallelujah, is situated right in the heart of the city. Over the last few years, the influx of young professionals has created so many new and exciting things to see and do. The rejuvenation of the city has been something really special to experience. There are some really beautiful suburbs in our neighborhood. Nestled below the iconic Table Mountain lies Refinancing and Tamboerskloof, filled with unique and beautiful homes. There's such a young vibe in the city with an incredible blend of diverse cultures catering to everybody's desire. Within the city, there are so many genuine and passionate people, and you'll find them in places like the Woodstock Exchange, offering everything from handcrafted works of art to a culinary experience hard to forget. For those who enjoy the outdoors, Lion's Head and Table Mountain are phenomenal places to explore. Living in the City Bowl has definitely given me my dream lifestyle, and this is my neighborhood.